Hey guys, it's Kevin of the Murphy guys. We're reviewing. This is a movie that I was actually really looking forward to. I did think this movie did have some potential, and that is the new Netflix film, Mute. And what Mute is essentially about is we center on the character of Leo, who is the aforementioned Mute character in this film, and basically what ends up happening is his girlfriend ends up getting kidnapped, and basically he spends the rest of the movie trying to search for her, and that's really all there is. So, Mute in general, I was really looking forward to this movie, to be honest with you. I mean, you guys know how I felt about Netflix, and how I just feel they've really fallen down the rabbit hole, honestly. I really have not been a fan of Netflix lately at all. I think they really have, they've clearly shown that they just don't seem to care much about quality. There's so much more about the quantity and how many films do we have, and they're not really focused on, let's just make a really good movie. I mean, sometimes they do, but it's very rare nowadays for this distributor, and it's just really starting to annoy me, and I really thought, given the talent and the directing behind Mute, that this could really be the first film that shows, no, Netflix really does still have it, and no. Not at all. This is the complete opposite. Mute is everything I hate about Netflix films. It's slow, it's boring, it's very uninteresting, and I don't really know why this movie really had to happen. We're just getting into it right now, starting off with the cast. So, the cast in general, that is actually one of the things I was really looking forward to in this movie. I thought this actually did have a really talented cast behind it, and honestly, as good as the cast is, they're not really utilized well here. Let's talk about Alexander Skarsgard, who plays the character of Leo. This is a great actor. I mean, he's coming off a Emmy win, as well as a Golden Globe win. I mean, this last year was a fantastic year for Alexander Skarsgard, and this just seems like like 10 steps back for him. I mean, Leo's not a bad character on paper. He's just not really given a lot to do here. Skarsgård, I think, does try with the role, but there's just not much for him to do. He doesn't really emote much in this movie. He's kind of emotionless, and he doesn't really have that much of a character, honestly. Sure, they get into his violent past and things like that, but there's just not really seemed to be much direction for him, and I don't really fault Skarsgård for this. I fault this more to the directing. We'll get to that in a little bit, but Skarsgård in general, I just felt had a lot of limitations in this movie. He's trying for sure, but this is definitely one of his weakest performances for sure. I was very disappointed with him in this movie. I thought he had a lot of potential, but he didn't really stick out to me at all. He just felt like a very stilted guy who was just instantly forgettable, and it really did annoy me that someone like Skarsgård would be in this role, because he is a very dynamic actor, and he doesn't really have anything to do here, and it really did disappoint me overall. However, the person I will give credit to is Paul Rudd as Cactus Bill. As weird as this character really is, Rudd does really try to bring some life into this role. He does do a good job with actually getting us to kind of root for him in a way, but even though he is the villain in this movie, there are points where you can, actually root for him. There are legitimate arguments you can make where, like, alright, I can see why we'd root for him. He is likable in the role overall. He's this surgeon. He's got this weird connection to Leo that I'm not really going to get into, but Rudd in general, I do think did a good job here. I did overall enjoy his character in the movie. Whenever we would come back to him, the movie wouldn't be as bad as it was. But again, there's not really much for Rudd to do here. But in a film that is so stilted and boring, which we'll talk about in a little bit, Rudd does bring a certain charisma and fun to the role that I feel like the rest of this film is solely missing for sure. Unfortunately, the same can't be said for Justin Theroux, who, in my opinion, gives maybe the worst performance I have ever seen from him as the character of Duck. Now, I get it. He's trying to do something different here. He's going against type. I am completely fine with that, but the character he's playing in the delivery is just no. I really was not a fan of this character at all, and the interactions between Cactus Bill and Duck are just very strange. This character goes into a very weird direction, and and Theroux doesn't, I think, play it that well at all. He plays it as, you know, it should be what happens to this character. It should be very creepy and intimidating, but instead, it just comes across as very forced. And again, I'm not really going to fault the actors in this. We'll get more what I think the main problem is here, but again, I really do love Justin Theroux as an actor. I mean, he was fantastic in The Leftovers. He really is a great actor all around, but something just did not work with this role here, and it really did show in terms of the performance overall. The rest of the acting here is whatever. I mean, all the other actors are basically just going through the motions. Seyneb, Saleh, she does what she needs to do. No one else really sticks out, and that's really all I have to say when it comes to the acting. Now let's get to what I really want to talk, which is the directing and the writing, because, oh boy, there is a lot to discuss here. Let's first talk about the directing by Duncan Jones, which is easily some of the most mishandled directing I have seen in a while. Because you're coming off the heels of Moon. And of course, if you guys didn't see, I already reviewed Moon on my channel with 22 Tiger Dude. But one of the best things about that movie were the limitations and the fact that it wasn't this huge, grandiose story. It was something much more simplistic than that, and it was relatively dark, and it was very original, wasn't trying to be like other things. Mute is the complete opposite. Everything about this movie feels derivative. Everything about this movie, the tone's wrong, just everything is completely wrong here. I mean, it's right off the bat, the main plot is way too dark. You don't care about anything going on, and because that, it just feels very dreary and monotone. It just doesn't really work at all. The comedy also really falls flat here. There are some comedic moments between Theroux and Rudd, and almost all of them fall flat. I really did not find anything funny here. The tone just does not work at all in this movie. It's clear that Jones was trying to go for something different, and it just didn't work at all. But the writing is easily the biggest problem, because, to be honest with you, I don't think Duncan Jones really knew what he wanted this movie to be. I've heard a lot of people say this, and I'm going to agree. I think the only reason that Alexander Skarsgard is mute and that this is very similar to Blade Runner is because the story in general is extremely uninteresting. I mean, there's really not much to the story. First of all, the reasoning for this character being mute is barely explained. We hear that he was in some sort of an accident and it damaged his throat somehow, but other than that, it's never really explained again. And to be honest with you, halfway through the movie, I'm like, why is he mute? Why did we really go with this choice? It just didn't really make sense for the character. There really was nothing about him that told me he needed to be mute. It wasn't like Shape of Water where he was kind of outnumbered and they were trying to make a parallel between how the monster was being, you know, was this weird being, and so was Sally Hawkins. Here, it just felt very arbitrary, and that's the best way to sum up this movie overall. Just very arbitrary. Nothing feels like it needed to happen in this movie. Nothing. Really, literally nothing about all the things you were looking forward to. Everything feels arbitrary. And I really was interested in getting into this character, but there's just not really much to him. Leo learns nothing in this movie. He doesn't really go through much of anything. He ends the movie basically in the exact same place he started it, and he's just not that interesting of a character to begin with. I was very bored by his character, and most of the movie, it's one of those films where he just comes upon like various people and he's trying to search for his girlfriend, and you don't care about their relation because right off the bat we're just thrown into it and we have no connection to them whatsoever. You don't really care about their relationship, and it's just not well handled there at all. So his side of the movie, it's just very boring. There's really not much to it. And then the other side of the movie, like I said, is this very weird story between Paul Rudd and Justin Theroux. They're like this ex-gay couple. It's very strange overall. Duck keeps referring to Cactus Bill as baby throughout the movie. Cactus Bill keeps calling him baby, but they're not in a relationship. It's just very weird writing. I did not know what they were trying to do here. And this plot in general is at first a lot more interesting than Leo's. It feels more dynamic. It feels like it actually does have some life into it. And like I said, Rudd is genuinely trying. But then halfway through the movie, there is this reveal with Justin Theroux's character, and I get what they were trying to do, but it comes so out of left field, and it feels less like a necessary direction for the character, and more like Jones just felt the story was so boring, he had to inject some sort of story into it, and it just didn't work. And I've seen other films try to do this and they handled it well, but here, again, it felt very arbitrary. It felt like they just kind of shoved it in here and it just did not need to happen. And honestly, where the movie just take it, I was fairly disgusted by. I really felt very uncomfortable watching it. I rarely say that, but yeah, the direction the movie takes with Justin Theroux, I really felt pretty uncomfortable, and I really don't know why the movie needs to go there, and again, it felt very out of place in that regard, just did not really work at all. Now let's get into the cinematography, because while everyone has bashed about this movie, and believe me, there are a lot of things to complain about for sure, there's definitely a lot of problems this movie has, which I've already said, the one constant I keep hearing is that the cinematography is gorgeous and the film is visually arresting. And while that may very well be the case, for me, it did not go that way at all. In fact, I kind of sat there and was like, am I missing something? Because to me, the cinematography felt very stale and, like most of the film, very, very derivative. And the whole futuristic backdrop is a cool concept. I'm not gonna lie. I think that's a cool idea overall. It was one of the things that got me into this movie. But again, it's so arbitrary. There's no reason for this to be in here. Again, it feels like Duncan Jones knew that this movie was boring and that it was going to put his audience to sleep. So it was like, you know what? Blade Runner did a very good job with adding cinematography to their film and making it some of the best cinematography I've ever seen. Let's just shove that in here to keep audiences from falling asleep, and it doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is because the future backdrop doesn't really play a role in this movie at all. I don't even know why this movie really is in the future, other than a couple nods to stuff with Justin Theroux's character, and that's really it. Other than that, there is no reason for this movie to be in the future. In fact, halfway through the movie, I was watching this with a friend, I'm like, oh yeah, this movie takes place in the future. That is how much of a non-element it really is here. It doesn't even really feel like it's part of the story. Blade Runner, there's all this depth, and there's so much detail and all this stuff going on. In Mute, it just feels like the most bland background you could possibly think of for the future. There's nothing really that great about this cinematography, and I'm very surprised that people are saying it's visually stunning, because to me, it just feels like a blatant ripoff of something like Blade Runner, but doesn't have the depth and the detail that film really did. So yeah, the cinematography isn't even a plus for me. I was not impressed with cinematography at all here. The score really doesn't work. Also, the moon connection in this movie is easily one of the most forced connections I've seen in a while. Literally, I'm gonna tell you right now, the only thing you see of Sam Rockwell in this movie is through TV appearances. That's it. All you see of him is he's on the TV, he's talking about the event that happened to him, and then we just cut away from it. And honestly, I have no idea why this was in here. Why did he want to connect this to Moon? It doesn't feel like the same sort of universe at all. I just don't understand it. I don't get why he wanted to do that. Again, it's baffling. There's so many things about this movie that's baffling. That's easily one of the biggest ones. I don't know why this is a Moon spiritual sequel at all. I wouldn't even call it one because, again, other than those two scenes, there's nothing else that really connects to Moon. There's like one reference about lunar industries, but other than that, there's really nothing. The editing here, it's all over the place. It's very choppy. The whole movie for the first hour feels like two completely different movies, especially when we cut to Cactus Bill and Duck. And like I said, there's a lot of this movie where I'm rooting for Cactus Bill. Guys, Cactus Bell is the villain of this movie. I should not be rooting for the villain. I mean, sure, you can make an argument with Black Panther, you know, you rooted for the villain, kind of, but you saw both of their points. Here, it's the complete opposite. I don't give a shit about Leo, and Cactus Bell is literally the only character that is somewhat dynamic to me. So yeah, obviously I'm going to somewhat care about him, and especially when we get into what happens with Justin Theroux, then I definitely care about him. But I really didn't see him as a villain. It's completely the wrong direction. I don't know what they were really trying to do there. It's all over the place. It's so long, and it's just really boring. I was so bored with this movie. There was nothing interesting going on, and like I said, it's just it's all over the place. It really is. Now, I will give the movie this. As bad as it is, it actually does have a pretty solid ending. The way the movie did wrap up, I did overall really like, and I did think, okay, that's a good way to end the movie, but I just wish the rest of the movie was as interesting as that ending, because I'd say the last, like, 10 minutes of this movie, I actually was really getting into it, but then the movie ended, and, again, that just really pissed me off overall. I think they could have done a lot more when it came to this story. There's a lot of things that just don't make sense overall. A very forced connection between the two plots. Like I said, it feels like they're in two completely different movies, and you know, once we do connect the two, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense in hindsight. It almost felt like Duncan Jones had two different movies that he was making, and, you know, they both really weren't good, so he decided to, like, combine them into one movie, and it just made it so much more overstuffed than needed to be, and easily is one of the biggest complaints in a, like, sea of complaints when it comes to this film. Mute, like I said, it literally took all the wrong directions that it possibly could and made this disaster of a film. I think Duncan Jones is a talented director. I do think he has legit talent in him, but it just seemed like with this movie, he did not know what he wanted to do. He did not have a ground plan of what he actually wanted this movie to be, so he just kind of did whatever the fuck he wanted and threw in all this unnecessary stuff. If you were to take out the Blade Runner element, take out the element of him being mute, take out the moon connection, nothing would change. Nothing would change this movie except for like one thing towards the end. Nothing would change here. There really is no reason for, like I said, any of this stuff to be here. It's so out of place. It wastes so much talent. I mean, you have a lot of talented actors here and they're completely wasted. It is instantly forgettable as well, but it's forgettable in the sense where it's like a bad forgettable. Like, there's a forgettable where I can watch, I'm like, oh, I watched that. That was just a movie. It happened, whatever. This is one where it should be memorable. There should be stuff here that's sticking with me, but really the more I think about it, the more I forgot like what even happened in this movie, because there just wasn't much of a story. There's not really much of a direction. There's not really much of a story. It's trying to be, like I said, this grandiose sci-fi film, and it just does not know how to approach that. The mystery isn't interesting. It's just very boring overall. Mute is just everything I can't stand about Netflix movies. I really hate this one overall. It's easily my biggest disappointment of the entire year, and I am overall going to give Mute a D. Ugh, Netflix, come on. I know you can do better than this. Seriously, I know. Look, I don't pick on Netflix because I know they're not the people who actually make these films, but they keep distributing films that they know aren't going to do well, and I don't see the need for doing that. They do definitely have talent. They've done Meyerowitz stories. They've done Okja. They've done Beast of No Nation. They can distribute good films. Just, you need to focus on the quality, not on what's going to make you more money, not on what has the most talent. What is going to be the film that puts you on the map? What is going to be your next Mudbound? That's what you need to be thinking about, and it's just something that Netflix is really lacking nowadays, and I know I complain about it a lot, but it's just really sad. It's sad to see how far this studio has really fallen, because years ago people were saying, oh, you know, Netflix is going to be the new standard. Netflix is going to be great, and now, cut to a few years later, Amazon and Hulu are basically beating the shit out of them at this point. So, yeah, just really not good on Netflix at all. But that's it for my review / rant on Mute. Let me know what you guys thought of this movie overall. Love your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.